Today, we're sitting down with the founder and CEO of Bryan Marketing Group, Jason Bryan, to learn how all of this began. So, Jason, take us back. What sparked the idea to start Bryan Marketing Group?
So Brand Marketing Group was started after about 10 years of doing lead generation in a couple of different industries. So we were specific to the automotive, insurance, and healthcare space for about a decade. And about 5 or 6 years ago, decided that it would make sense to be able to take that same lead generation model that we built nationally for specific markets and be able to bring it to local businesses so that their businesses too could generate the leads that they need to dramatically increase their sales. And so, in doing that, obviously, we had to hire all kinds of different folks from photographers to videographers, website designers, programmers, social media experts, pay-per-click experts, you name it, we brought them on. So now that we can actually handle everything in-house, we're able to bring what we've done historically on a much larger scale to the local market here in South Florida.
What are some of the common marketing mistakes that small businesses are making today?
When people approach us and they ask us for help, usually it's because there's an expectation setting that they've walked through themselves that maybe they haven't actually voiced. So generally when people come to us, there's two specific thoughts that they have. Either how do I make my brand look and feel a certain way? How do I give it a voice and a personality? Or they want to know, how do I increase sales? And a lot of times they think that they're equal and they might not be. And so a lot of times for small businesses, what I recommend them do initially is kind of walk through what's important. Is it that I want to get people to see my brand a certain way, or do I actually really just need to boost sales? And for most small businesses, budget comes into play. So if budget is something that is a thought for a small business owner and they're really trying to increase sales, I usually try to steer them towards a modality that will actually help them to generate leads and not just something that might enhance their brand image. Because I think that a lot of people, they'll start with the way that something looks instead of how it makes money. And so sometimes getting that out initially is an important thing. Another big mistake that people do is they try to compare their brands with other people's brands. And so if my voice and the authenticity of what I'm doing looks and feels like somebody else's, I think that that can be a positive thing, a good thing for somebody to say, hey, I like the look and feel of somebody else's brand, but then giving it its own voice and making it their own and their own personality. And then finally, what I would say is a lot of people try to do too much by themselves and they don't actually seek the authority that a lot of times an agency can have, but it doesn't always have to be an agency. It can just be somebody that really knows, social media well, or paid search well, or paid social, or SEO really well. And so a lot of times business owners, especially small business owners, try to take all that on themselves, become experts in something that maybe they're not experts in, instead of staying true to their lane and what they really are experts in, and letting somebody like the team at Bryan Marketing Group kind of take hold of that and bring whatever their vision or their lead generation strategy is to life.
What industry do we work with here at Bryan Marketing Group?
So Bryan Marketing Group works with pretty much any industry. So the strategies that we implement aren't specific to one industry or another. However, we have experience in a ton of different industries. We've done restaurants, we've done nonprofits, we've done brick and mortars, we've done e-commerce brands. You name it, we've done it. Whether it's a big business or a small business. And one of the cool things to know about Bryan Marketing Group as well is we actually own a lot of brands ourselves. So things like legal brands, we own a handful of domains in that space. We own a handful of healthcare domains. We own a handful of automotive domains. And the cool thing that I always try to think of is when you're choosing a marketing agency, if they're not able to do effective marketing for themselves, it's hard for me to fathom that they're going to be able to do effective marketing for somebody else. And so I would say if you're looking at an agency, whether it's us or somebody else, that question and the answer to that question of what industries have you worked in, and actually having the proof in the pudding is really an important question to ask, and make sure that the agency that you're seeking has some level of experience doing exactly what it is that you're asking them to do. And if they haven't done it for themselves, it's hard to imagine that they're going to be able to do a great job for somebody else.
Another question we get a lot here at Bryan Marketing Group is, do I need a big budget to work with you?
It's a great question. Bryan Marketing Group, we pride ourselves on making sure that everything is transparent and all-inclusive when you work with us. So the rates that we charge, I think, are honest and something that we're proud of. That said, your ad budget itself, so what you're paying to companies like Facebook or Instagram, Google, um, those budgets should scale up if and when it works. So in other words, if you're making money, we should be spending more money on ads to make sure that we're able to scale what might start as a small budget and make it much larger. So in other words, if I spend $1 and I make five, how often should you do that? And hopefully the answer is as many times as we can. And so that's generally how our approach is as we come into a marketing campaign or we're managing a marketing campaign, that the desired outcome is when I spend money, I make more money. And so when I say yes and no, the idea behind it is you should be paying us something that's reasonable and something that's affordable. And you should have an ad budget set aside separately so that as it grows, you're able to continue to make sure that you're putting more and more money in so that you make more and more money.
Another question we get a lot here at BMG is, what is the process like? What happens after I reach out to somebody at Bryan Marketing Group?
It's a great question. So we want to make the process as simple and easy as possible. We recognize when you're hiring a marketing agency, that can almost be a scary thing. And so generally we'll sit down at a table similar to this one, maybe without the lights and the cameras, and actually map out your goals, timelines, and make sure that the production schedule, the redesigns or designs, and the actual timeline that you can expect to start seeing results are very clearly mapped out. We talk about budgets, we talk about ad spends, and make sure that everything is totally transparent so that you're ready to rock and roll whenever it is that you're actually turning the campaigns live. Signing up is simple. We have all kinds of different plans and packages for tons of different budgets. And so when you're considering, is it nervous or should I be nervous? Is it a scary thing to go through this process? We've done it, hundreds of times. And so we try to make sure that that process is super easy and super seamless.
What makes Bryan Marketing Group different?
When I think about a lot of local businesses, I kind of think of them operating in silos. So there's a ton of great web designers locally. There's a ton of great photographers and videographers. And any chance that we have to encourage people to work with them, we do. But what I really like about what we do is everything is kind of under one roof. So if you're looking for a turnkey, everything included type of service, I would love to be considered. I would love for Bryan Marketing Group to be considered. We have offices across the Southeast. All of our staff is in-house. So we have photographers, videographers, web designers, programmers, front-end and back-end developers. We have studios that you can use. We have literally, you name it, it's within the realm of possible for Bryan Marketing Group, and it's all done under one roof. You also get a dedicated account manager so that any questions or your experience, anything that you're needing or wanting, you have a dedicated person to go to. And so I like to think about it from that perspective as all inclusive. The other thing that's, I think, a major differentiator between us and a lot of other firms is most of our money is actually made on platforms and websites that we own, not from the agency side itself. So the cool thing about that is we're not just selling our services, we're actually using our services ourselves. So when it comes to having actual real world financial consideration or financial implications from the outcome of the marketing that we're doing, we understand firsthand what it's like to work with Bryan Marketing Group because we're actually doing it for ourselves as well.
What was one of the first challenges that you faced when starting Bryan Marketing Group?
So in my mind, Bryan Marketing Group, although only a few years old in this version, actually goes back to when I actually started my first business because it was really the same concept. It was doing lead generation, but in a specific industry. And at the time I was young, I was 20, 21 years old, and I had no real world experience doing any sort of entrepreneurial adventures or doing anything like this. So going in and being nervous was something that I think is normal. But for me, I also had the stigma of being young. And so a lot of times I would get hit with like, hey kid, hey, how are you going to make a big change or how are you going to really impact my business if you haven't even been in business or have had a business before? And what I did, and recognizing that that was one of the things that people would assume about me, is I surrounded myself with people who knew more than I did. I grabbed some mentors that actually ended up becoming partners of mine in that first venture, and really grabbed hold and sunk my teeth into anything and everything that they would tell me, and I would read up on things that from an entrepreneurial perspective gave me a little bit more confidence to come to the table with answers to those tough questions. And then what was cool about that is if you were to go and look at a lot of the accolades that we ended up accomplishing over the course of time, most of them were things like 30 under 30. So being a young entrepreneur, how to make $1 million before you graduate, and all of these different things. So what's kind of a cool thought is, at least for me, what was one of my biggest challenges actually became one of my biggest accolades. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. So overcoming adversities, whether that's your age, whether it's um, something that happened to you in your life. I think for a lot of people, hearing other people's stories and understanding that people have come and been where they've been, and just knowing that when you're able to actually overcome some of those adversities, they actually can become your biggest accolades.
What was the biggest lesson that you learned in your first year?
The biggest lesson that I learned in my first year, that's a really good one. I would say focus on the things that matter. I think a lot of business owners will come into something and have a preconceived notion of how it should go. And they'll come into it focusing on maybe too much of the brand side and not enough on the sales side, or they care too much what people think. The other thing, and I know you only asked for one, but I think that there's a second one that's really important. Things don't always go the way that you plan. And if you're going to be too much of a stickler on sticking to the plan, that there's a very good chance that it doesn't end up working. So having the ability and the determination and the discipline to stay true to the objective, but be flexible in that so that if something isn't going exactly how you might have wanted it to, that you're actually still able to come up for a breath, regroup, and then go back down and make sure that it actually ends up working, even if it wasn't exactly how you planned.
When is the right time for someone to hire a Brian Marketing Group?
It's a tricky question because I think that for different people, it means different things. So usually it's when you're starting to ask questions that you can't figure out on your own and that you would hope that somebody might have more experience doing. I think about some businesses that might be super heavy on social media, and it may never be the right time. It may be something that's just that important that you need somebody physically on your team, on staff, in house, doing things on a day to day basis. You might be so heavy in a particular type of lead generation that you need that to be managed in house. So there are definitely solutions that should be considered. And I think that when you're starting to ask those like expert level questions, that's when I would start looking for an agency partner. There's also the flexibility side of it, where if you really are working more on your business than in your business, I think that that would also be an indicator that it might be time. And I also think, kind of as a closing thought, there's there's the time value. So even if you can do it, if your time is better spent working towards making your business better, and if your time it's actually better used to make money doing something else, it might be time to at least start to explore the opportunity of hiring Brand Marketing Group.
A lot of times people ask us why not just hire somebody in house at their own business. What would you say to those people?
So just like anything else, a lot of people are good at a lot of different things, but usually they're not good at everything. And so when you're looking at hiring an agency, hopefully you're identifying that within an agency setting, there's going to be people that are more numbers centric, and then we call it more color centric on the other side. So think design, the way something looks and feels and the way that the consumer experiences it. And then the other side is it working, right? And how do I determine what metrics I should be um, doing more of or less of, and what metrics I should be using to make any sort of decision? And so when you're hiring, say, a marketing coordinator, a lot of times those people are incredibly talented, incredibly bright. And I certainly never discourage somebody from hiring somebody in house to help coordinate things. But I would certainly tell you not to expect them to be a web designer, a programmer, a social media expert, somebody that does photography and videography. And then all of those things combined, um, after they're done with all of them, expect to be able to go back, do the reporting, make sure that they can make educated suggestions or do experiments to test different things. It's not usually something that is within one person's purview. And so when you're hiring an agency, making sure that they have the ability to do all of it, I think is really important. And I think is something that Bryan Marketing Group is uniquely equipped to handle for local businesses and national businesses alike.
What is the biggest compliment that someone could give you?
I think the biggest compliment somebody could give us is that we truly made a difference. When we're dealing with business owners, they're people and they have families and they have employees. And if we were able to come in and help them in some way, I think that that's a very cool feeling. A lot of our clients also are nonprofits. So our ability to give back in the community and actually make a difference to these organizations and the causes that they so desperately need help with, I think is another thing that's really rewarding. Um, and so the fact that if somebody acknowledges that we've made a difference and has the courage to tell us, I think that that's one of those things that you don't take lightly, and it's certainly a feel good thing.